Hello and welcome to this exclusive interview here on France 24. Our guest is retired US General David Petraeus, who was commander of US and coalition troops in Iraq. He was also a commander of those troops in Afghanistan. He was also director of the Central Intelligence Agency until 2012 when he resigned. He remains a very popular person in the Middle East, especially on military matters. Thank you very much for joining us from the offices of KKR, a private equity firm where you are currently working in New York.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Mark.
So I want to begin with the situation in Afghanistan. President Obama just announced that he would keep 5,500 US troops in Afghanistan when he leaves office in 2017, essentially reneging on his promise to end the war on his watch. Are you satisfied by that decision from President Obama?
Well, look, this had to be a difficult decision for him. We know what his goal was with respect to the drawdown of forces, but this was, I think, very much the right decision. In fact, it will actually leave the current level of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, some 9,800 or so, all the way through and into January of 2017. So this will give another full year of the current levels. And what we've seen is that Afghan forces will indeed fight, and they are, and die for their country. In fact, their losses have been substantial. The challenge has been that as we have drawn down fairly significantly, that some of the so-called enablers, the combat enablers, the close air support, the attack helicopters, air medevac operations, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance assets have had to draw down as well. And so I know that another area now being looked at certainly is the mix of this force within the 9,800 troop cap. But again, I think very much the right decision. Afghanistan remains a very important mission. We went there because that's where the 9/11 attacks were planned and where the initial training of the attackers was conducted. And we are still there because we do not want Afghanistan to become a sanctuary once again for Al-Qaeda or now the Islamic State or other transnational extremists. So it's an important mission, and our Afghan partners are very much showing their mettle on the battlefield, and it's important that we continue to support them.
General Petraeus, as you mentioned, there are concerns that the Taliban are gaining ground again. This is America's longest war, and so this begs the question. The U.S. is going to keep troops. Now there seems to be no end in sight in Afghanistan. Can this war still be won?
Well, first of all, we've had troops in Korea, for example, for way over nearly 7 decades or so. We had troops on European soil for even longer than that. We've had long duration deployments throughout the Middle East. Certainly this is more of an active combat situation than those others. But I think this is an important mission. We have a professional force. Everyone in it has raised his or her right hand and taken the oath of enlistment or office, and they are determined to continue this mission. So I think this is very much doable. It's obviously dramatically reduced from, say, the 100,000 U.S. forces that were there when I was privileged to command the mission in Afghanistan, when we also had, of course, a superb French contingent as well.
I want to get to the situation in Syria. Obviously, we've seen a major development in recent weeks with Russia's military involvement, with airstrikes, missile strikes. Now there are reports of an offensive coordinated between the forces of the regime of Bashar al-Assad, Russian warplanes, Iranian forces, militias, on the strategic town of Aleppo, which has been partially controlled by the opposition for years. Are we seeing a turning point in this seemingly unending war in Syria?
Well, I don't know if this is a turning point. We're certainly seeing a reversal of momentum on the battlefield. I think the reason the Russians entered, the reason the Iranians are doing more, Lebanese Hezbollah and other Shia militia, is because indeed Bashar al-Assad was slowly but surely losing additional terrain. Russia wants very much to maintain its only remaining naval base in the Mediterranean, the base at Tartus, and the air base that it has north of that in Latakia, also on the Mediterranean or very near it. And so they have gone in. They are working to shore up the efforts of the Bashar al-Assad regime and indeed to support an offensive. And in contrary to what President Putin indicated early on, that he would be going after the Islamic State, in fact, some 90% of the sorties are actually going after the so-called moderate opposition, the Sunni Arab opposition, a number of elements of which have been supported by the United States. Syria is an extraordinary problem. The Russian involvement has made it even more complex. It was already a regional sectarian civil war being fought on the soil of Syria and to a degree in Iraq. It has become a geopolitical Chernobyl in recent years, just spewing violence, instability, extremism, and now, of course, refugees, not just throughout the region, but well into Europe now also, and indeed having an effect around the world. So this makes it even more complicated, more complex, and there are new initiatives to pursue possible negotiated settlements. I am very cautious, however, about the prospects for those. It is said repeatedly that there is no military solution to the situation, to the problems in Syria. I guess that is correct, but there is a military context within which diplomacy can work. And having Bashar al-Assad feeling that he is once more on the offensive is not going to lead him to make concessions at a negotiating table, I don't think. Beyond that, it's very unclear who will negotiate for the moderate opposition, the Sunni Arab population. And even with that, of course, you still have the significant problem posed by the Islamic State and by the Khorasan group, an al-Qaeda affiliate, and Jabhat al-Nusra, the other al-Qaeda affiliate on the soil of Syria. So this has become a real kaleidoscope of different groups, and determining how there can be a negotiated settlement here, I think, is going to be very, very challenging indeed, and may prove not possible.
We know that when you were at the CIA, you recommended that the opposition in Syria should be covertly armed and trained, that this was rejected by President Obama. Do you think this was a mistake because the opposition was never an effective military force on the ground?
Well, I can't talk about what I might have recommended as the director of the CIA because that would have been in the covert action arena. It has been clear all along, however, that to achieve any objectives that we might have in Syria, whether it is the defeat of the Islamic State and the al-Qaeda affiliate, or changing the momentum on the battlefield so that Bashar al-Assad and his regime might actually be willing to negotiate a settlement, any of those objectives require a moderate Sunni Arab opposition force. That force was not developed in the early years, although we did have a stated policy that Bashar al-Assad must go. It's publicly known that, in fact, since I left the agency, sometime after that, that there has been an effort by the agency and others. Indeed, some of those forces are those that are fighting up in the north, again, all publicly known, and some others in the south. But that force is critical, again, to the achievement of these different objectives that we have. And we are going to have to help and enable that force more. I have, in testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee, recently advocated the establishment of a safe haven or a sanctuary, if you will, in which we will defend forces from whomever attacks them. And that if Bashar al-Assad's forces drop barrel bombs on them, that we will ground his air force. We have that capability. It is doable. And again, over time, this force is absolutely crucial to achieving virtually any of the objectives that we have in Syria.
Very quickly, General Petraeus, because we have very little time left. In Iraq, do you think ISIS can still be defeated? Many in the US have questions the Iraqi army's willingness and capability to fight that enemy. Do you think, again, this war can be won?
Well, I think that ISIS can be rolled back. I think that is gradually happening. There is slow but steady progress. Again, never as fast as people would like to see. Iraqi forces are still being reconstituted, still being developed, trained, and equipped. And that is ongoing. The real issue in Iraq, however, at the center of gravity is actually in Baghdad. It is all about Iraqi politics. And this is where we have to redouble our efforts to support those who favor inclusive policies, because if you cannot get the Sunni Arab population back into the fabric of society, as we did during the surge, in fact, a hugely important achievement of the surge, if you can't do that, you are not going to be able to sustain the gains that are made against the Islamic State. So that is actually the most important battlefield in Iraq. It's in Baghdad, and it is Iraqi politics, even more important than the front lines in the fight against the Islamic State, as important as they are and as important as it is to continue the progress and continue to roll the Islamic State back. But if that Sunni Arab population does not feel included once again in the Iraqi fabric of society, it will be very, very difficult to sustain the gains that are achieved on the front lines of this battlefield.
General Petraeus, thank you very much. This is all we have time for. Thank you for your views on the situation in the very volatile Middle East. And thank you very much for watching this edition of the interview here on France 24.